Good evening, and welcome to this evening's Eglinton Crosstown West Extension session, focusing on the future Kipling-Eglinton station. My name is Joseph Thornley. I'm the CEO of 76 Engage, Metrolinx's public engagement partner for virtual consultation. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's Q&A session, and as such, I'll try to keep the event on time, make sure as many questions are answered as possible, and make sure that the questions are answered as fully as possible. One important note, you can see closed captioning for tonight's event. If you need to use closed captioning, simply look down at the bottom of your video screen and click on the CC icon. Closed captioning is available. As we begin, let's take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. In particular, these lands are covered by 20 territories, and we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous nations and peoples. And we should conduct business in a manner that is built on the foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Metrolinx is committed to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples and to working towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. Also, before we hear from our panel, let's take a moment to consider safety. Safety is fundamental to everything that Metrolinx does, and everyone has a role to play in safety. As we know, construction of the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension has begun. As shared in the last virtual open house, you'll soon be seeing trucks and equipment are operating near the Scarlett Avenue and Eglinton Avenue West area in preparation of the extraction shaft that is starting next spring. So please stay alert in these construction zones. Stay alert for heavy traffic. Look for things that are coming from a place that you might not have expected them to. Be careful when walking, driving, or cycling. We can all take care of one another. So we've scheduled this evening's session to last an hour and a half. Metrolinx will begin the session with a presentation about the future Kipling-Eglinton station entrance. They will be talking about the design process and seeking your input. In the second half of tonight's session, we'll take your questions and provide answers. We'll start the Q&A portion of the meeting with some of the questions that you have submitted via writing on the website right below where you're looking at the video. There's still time for you to upvote questions if you want to see some of these questions dealt with live. We also have a call-in option for tonight's meeting. You'll notice right below the video, there is a yellow Join Zoom button. You can click on that to join a Zoom room where your moderators will be waiting for you, and you'll be able to ask your question out loud orally in the second half of the Q&A session. So you can go over there now or later in the meeting if you'd like. Please note that tonight we're seeking some very specific feedback from residents regarding the future station at Kipling-Eglinton. Therefore, especially in the first part, I'm going to select from the questions that are directly relevant to the station. That doesn't mean that other questions won't be answered. Metrolinx goes through the questions after the meeting and responds to questions in writing. But we'll start off with the questions directly relevant to this particular station. And if there's time after the Zoom room, we may have time to come back and deal with some of the others that have been dealt with in other meetings or that are dealing with the right-of-way more generally. Again, if you've just joined us, the event is being closed captioned. To use this feature, you can enable it by clicking on the CC at the bottom of your video player. So, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts for today. We have 5 people with us here tonight. Joshua Engel-Yan is the program sponsor for the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension. With him is Mary Dalia Guerrero Pena, the project manager tunneling for the ECWE. Omid Nake is the principal designer for Arab, Metrolinx's technical advisor on this project. Also with us tonight is Sarah Chowdhury. She's the project manager, environmental programs at Metrolinx. And Mary O'Nally is the senior project manager, stations for the ECWE. Josh, I think you're going to start off the presentation for us.
Great. Thank you very much, Joseph. Good evening, everyone. I can't see you, but thank you very much for joining for this virtual open house focused on the Kipling-Eglinton station. And it's a snowy evening, so maybe there are some advantages to virtual open houses. And so we're excited. This is our first station focused consultation on Eglinton Crosstown West Extension, and we look forward to more on the other stations in the new year. Just to take you through quickly what we're going to talk through in the presentation before we get into the questions is a bit about what we've heard so far about the Kipling-Eglinton station location and the local area. Some of our key considerations, design principles when we approach the stations, and then the Kipling-Eglinton site context. Then I'll pass it over to Sarah to talk a bit about the Woodlot, and she'll pass it over to Omid to talk about the station entrance options. And then I'll finish it off in terms of, well, actually, then we have a little bit from Maridalia on some of the tunneling work happening in the Kipling-Eglinton area, and then I'll pick it up at the end in terms of what's next before we go into the Q&A. So next slide, please. So we've had a number of conversations over the past months with community members in terms of some of the residents who live in the townhomes along Eglinton near Kipling, elected officials, as well as community groups in the area like the Richmond Gardens, Ratepayers and Residents Association. And we've also been working closely with our City of Toronto colleagues, especially in Parks and Recreation and Road and Transportation, and they've been challenging us on different ideas as we've been trying to develop different options for the Kipling-Eglinton station location. So some of the key things that we've heard so far is, from a benefits perspective, ensure the station is fully accessible for customers of all ages and abilities. And think about how we can blend the station into the community, especially given the context of the Woodlot on the northwest corner that we'll talk a bit more about, and the busy Eglinton Road, and in that in mind, keeping the traffic lanes open during construction, and thinking about, in particular, in terms of the context of this area, are there ways to keep the station small and minimize construction impacts while also protecting trees? So there are a number of considerations, and I think as you'll see as we get into it and we start to talk about the options, the different options prioritize different aspects of being, partly in the Woodlot versus different changes to the roadway. So I think you'll be able to see how those different considerations play out. So just going into the next slide, when we think about stations in general, and just to be clear, we're in this design phase, so planning and design phase on the stations. This is all about us landing on where we want to put the station building, and ultimately how the station will function. So we're not in a contract right now to build these stations, so this is the right time to get your feedback. So we are thinking about how to make these stations, first of all, work and be easy to use and to connect people well in terms of travel time and connectivity, how to connect with the local community, and how to protect the environment, while at the same time thinking about how we limit the impacts to private property, transit and traffic, and then also thinking about deliverability. How hard is the station to build? And that also relates to the community impact. So you can actually see that the things that we've heard and the typical key considerations that we have for our stations during the design phase actually line up pretty well. And so if we move to the next slide, please, just getting a little bit into our design principles. Can we advance the slide, please? Thank you. So a number of key design principles when we approach stations on our transit projects, and I will relate this to Eglinton Crosstown West. So it needs to work in terms of helping to create an effective and reliable transit line, and also be passenger focused so that it's easy to use. The user-centered design is this idea that people can understand easily how to use the station and that it's accessible and safe. And these two next ones, number 3 and number 4, are in gray because they're really get highlighted in the options that we'll be bringing forward. So public realm benefits and placemaking. And you'll see in the options that there are ways that we can use the scale of the buildings, the orientation, and then the kind of public realm aspects to highlight the local area. And I think a question that we're interested in hearing about as we solicit feedback is how do you think people will use this station? Is it really just an in and out kind of place to access transit, or is it also about helping to create more of a place at Kipling and Eglinton? And then, as we've heard, context and integration. So while these stations do need to, from an architectural perspective, speak to the other stations that are being built on Eglinton Crosstown, which are almost complete, and I'm sure many of you have seen what those look like. They do need to speak to those stations architecturally. That doesn't mean they need to be exactly like those types of 3-story crosstown stations, so that there can be more thinking about how it blends in with the local context. And then the last point around intuitive wayfinding and making sure people can navigate easily. So if we go to the next slide, one of the comments and questions that we have heard from the community is, can you please make this station at Kipling and Eglinton as small as possible? There's a lot of natural features in the area with the woodlot, and just make it just blend in and almost fade into the background in some of the comments that we've received. We're taking that into account, but we do want to highlight that there are important elements in each station that influence the size and shape. So needs to be with the principles about being usable to customers, to all people with all different abilities. We need to provide elevators, barrier-free paths of travel, stairs and escalators, and circulation in a public space. And we also need to provide both a main access point and an emergency exit building, so that there are 2 points of egress in the case of an emergency. So those are all factors that need to be considered, but I think you'll see as we get into the options, we have really tried to keep these keep the station functional, but keep the buildings itself on the smaller side. And as well, our approach on the 4 underground stations is to really focus on one main station entrance building, so there's not a whole bunch of different station entrances. So with the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're in the we're into our design stage. We have not let a contract to build these stations yet. This is really the right time to get your input, and we have 3 different options for the station that we'll be presenting. The station location. 2 we really think have a potential to be advanced forward. 1 has some pretty challenging constructability constraints, but this is really the opportunity for us to get your feedback on what you want to prioritize, and to hear how you think you would use it. And to Joseph's point, there is the survey with 3 simple questions that you can link to right below the video. So hopefully after the presentation, you can go, and there's 3 questions there, and we'd love to get your feedback, and that's going to stay up until the beginning of January. So the folks on the line now and others can provide their input. And also to highlight that at this stage, we're not getting into the details of architectural finishes or exactly what the station would look like or exactly where everything will be laid out inside the station. At this stage, we're really focused on what's the right configuration for the station building, what corner, where in the road should it be, all those types of things. And you'll see that in the options. So happy to take questions on the details, although for the most part, we won't have those answers, and those will be more focused on station design type engagements happening through 2022. So next slide, please. And then just a little bit on the context. I'm sure many of you on the line are very familiar with the corner of Kipling and Eglinton. At the northwest corner is the Woodlot. At the northeast corner, you can see the townhomes that come pretty close to the street. On the southwest corner, there's kind of a wider boulevard with some trees and then the apartment buildings. And then on the southeast corner, there's quite a few trees and on the south side, of course, is the multi-use path as well. And if we go to the next slide, I'll highlight a few things here before I hand it over to Sarah to talk about the Woodlot. Kipling and Eglinton, the station in Kipling and Eglinton is the one location where the actual station box, which is the underground component of the station where the platforms will be and where the trains will stop, is directly under the roadway. And so you can see that black rectangle, the black with white inside rectangle reflects the location of the Kipling and Eglinton station box. It is put under the road for Kipling and Eglinton for a couple of reasons, both because the townhomes are quite close to the street. So we didn't want to put the tunnel directly under any of those townhomes. And then, of course, because of the Woodlot. So at the other three underground stations, Royal York, Islington, and Martin Grove, the station box itself is to the north of the road, and that allows the construction when that station box happens to happen outside of the roadway. That's not the case for Kipling and Eglinton. The other point that I just wanted to highlight is that pink line, which is a major gas main. And as we'll get into in a little bit, there's if we want to do anything on the south side of the road, that involves gas main relocation, which is complicated, expensive, and takes a lot of time. So that will play into some of our evaluation of the options as well. So with that, if we take to the next slide, I'm going to pass it over to you, Sarah, to talk about the Woodlot.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you to everyone who's joined. Good evening. So basically, I think the main thing that we wanted to emphasize here is that Metrolinx absolutely recognizes the importance of this woodlot from both an ecological and a recreational perspective. We're looking to protect this woodlot and minimize our impacts as much as possible. So to do this, we've been surveying the trees and the vegetation in the woodlot, as well as any wildlife that may be present. We've so far completed tree inventories, species at risk studies, and bat acoustic surveys. The findings so far indicate that the woodlot contains several different species of trees, however, is mainly dominated by sugar maples. These are fairly common in Toronto and are considered as native species. The finding also indicated that there were no species at risk wildlife that were identified, including any species at risk bats. However, what they did find was that there was one particular butternut tree which is considered a species at risk. This particular tree is located along the southwestern boundary of the woodlot, and at the moment, all the designs that we are considering is to make sure that this particular tree is protected and not impacted by our designs. So obviously, with some of these design options, there may be needs to move some of the trees to kind of prioritize this transit project. However, what we will be doing is compensating the trees in accordance with our Metrolinx vegetation guideline. So the guideline the minimum requirements of this guideline is to compensate as per the bylaw requirements. But in addition to that, the guideline also requires for compensation planting, which takes into account additional ecological value of the trees. We're also looking to undertake compensation plantings as early as possible. So we've actually already started some of this planting in the area in partnership with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority just this past fall. And we intend on doing more in the next planting season, which should be coming up in spring of next year. So with that, I will hand it over to Omid, I think.
Hi, thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. Can I get the next slide, please? So I'm going to take you through some of the considerations that we have had thinking around station design and station box construction. So just as an early reminder right now that our goal obviously is to minimize the tree impact and traffic impact that we have around this area as much as possible during all stages of construction. And right now, the woodlot trees and boulevard trees on the south side are fully protected during the headwall construction. As you can see here in this map, you can see a kind of red box. That's the station box underground, which is defined by the alignment already part of the advanced tunnel contract, and the headwalls associated to that is part of that contract. So that construction will happen in 2022, and during that construction, there is going to be no impact to the woodlot and south boulevard trees. The station box is underground, where the customer is actually going to get to the platform underground and get to the train and continue to their journey. As you can see, there is a temporary traffic impact during the construction of the box when we start construction of the box for the station, and that's anticipated to be in 2024 and 2025 around that time. And in order to do the box, we're going to move the traffic lanes temporarily towards south, about 10 meters south, so that we can keep the traffic lanes open in each direction, 2 traffic lanes at least, in order not to have any significant traffic impact during the construction, and then minimize the impact that we have to the community really during the construction. There are thinkings around if the traffic lanes are reduced to 1 lane, then the traffic impact and the impact on the trees is going to get reduced. With the 2 lanes traffic impact that we have in each direction, the impact to the woodlot is going to be 2.5% of the woodlot, and then we're going to have impact on south side boulevard. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, they are thinking about compensation of some of those trees, which already started. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, and during the conversation earlier, the station box is already sitting under the road, and the idea behind that was to minimize the impact to the woodlot. Then, in order to get to the station box, we actually have 3 options. We have explored 3 options. They are namely called northwest option, where the station entrance and emergency exit building, they are located on the northwest of Kipling-Eglinton. A southwest option, where the station entrance and the emergency exit building are located southwest of Kipling-Eglinton. And there is a hybrid stacked option, as we call it, where the road is shifted south and the station entrance and the exit building they're actually located on top of the box, or partially located on top of the box. So next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through each of these options and explain some of the characteristics of each option. So the first option, as you can see here, is called northwest option. In these drawings that you see on the screen, you can see a dotted dashed red line which shows the station box already under the road. You see a red area which is the station entrance and exit building, and also you see a yellow space which actually shows the construction laydown area for each of these options. The northwest option is already the baseline location, which is already in EA addendum and also initial business case. So so some of the characteristics of this option is that by introducing the northwest entrance, we can have opportunities in terms of improving the public realm and opportunity to use woodlot and add amenities to the community so that the community can better use the woodlot on their daily life. This option, if it goes forward, it will impact the woodlot approximately 20% of the woodlot, and through our surveys and the impact studies that we have done, depending on and there are a few sub options to this option. Depending on which option we choose in this northwest option, we have anything between 17 to 21 significant trees impacted. In terms of traffic and transit impact is really consistent with other underground stations. So we will have the entrance north side of the boulevard outside the right of way, and that's what we have also in Royal York, in Martin Grove, and in Islington. And in terms of travel time and connectivity, this will provide us the shortest transfer time to and from the bus, because the bus also sits right on northwest of the corner of intersection, and also it provides quickest access for the highest majority of customers. And right now, 80% of our passengers are coming from north-south bus lane, and this will provide the quickest connectivity. In terms of the construction and deliverability of this option, this provides us with the shortest construction duration and least overall disruption during the construction. The reason for that is because the station entrance is not sitting on top of the box, and the box and station entrance can be built simultaneously or in parallel. And therefore the overall schedule is shortened as much as possible, which is 3.5 years. That means the construction impact and the overall impact to the community is really shortened as much as possible. We are looking at this option to still move it forward based on the feedback that we get from you and improve the design as much as possible. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, if this option was, the option to go forward, you can see that we have station entrance and ancillary building sitting on the northwest, and there is a gap between the station entrance and the ancillary building on the western side of the station entrance, where we are thinking to utilize some sort of public amenity, introduce skylights to the overall station design, and provide seating area, benches, to this place, and also provide what I call it a gateway, both from the northwest corner and also from the middle toward a kind of boardwalks through the woodlot, so that it get connected to the northwest of the community and provides an opportunity for the neighbors to use this woodlot more proactively. So there are, and these are just examples of what can be done in that area and then what can be improved. Next slide, please. This is just showing a very indicative schematic design, because we're really at early stages of design. Therefore, the design is not really shown to great detail, but it shows where this gap is, and then how it can provide a gateway toward the woodlot through public amenities and the kind of parklet that we can have there, and provide a kind of apron toward the woodlot and get us to the boardwalks that we can get through the woodlot. Next slide, please. Another option that we looked at, and that's kind of what we call it southwest option. As Josh mentioned earlier, there's a significant gas main sitting on the southern side of the Eglinton Road. If this option was an option, the entrance and exit building would sit right on top of the gas main, and that meant that the gas main has to relocate toward the north side. And as soon as you relocated the gas main toward the north side, because we also have a station box sitting almost touching the woodlot, therefore the gas main has to go north of the station box. That will immediately impact the woodlot, which is approximately 8% of the woodlot. And sorry, next slide. I think you moved back to the previous slide. Yeah, no. Yeah, correct. So that will impact approximately 15 trees I'm seeing a bit of lag in slides. Are you guys seeing the right slides?
Omid, I think we are seeing the right slide.
Okay,
We're
now
seeing
it's the right one.
station
Yes.
entrance.
Yeah. Okay. My apologies. So approximately 8% of the woodlot is going to get impacted, and then 15 significant trees also is going to get impacted as a result of this gas main moving toward north. This option, when we locate the station entrance and the emergency exit building in south side, it will reduce the boulevard and the greenway on the south side, and it will impact obviously, you know, the way that we connect the station entrance to the box, because this is slightly further from the box, and therefore the passenger transfer time from the bus to platform is going to be longer. So in terms of the deliverability of this option, right now this is the worst option for us because it's going to take significant amount of time to relocate the gas main and also do the traffic staging, because we have to do it in two stages. Therefore, it's going to take us a slight, like around 5 years to build this station. And it doesn't provide us with the right solution to protect the woodlot, because at the end of the day, we're still gonna impact the significant trees quite comparatively with the northwest entrance option. So right now, we are not looking to move forward with this option anymore. And the last option that we looked at, next slide, please. Oh yeah, so I forgot to say. So here it just shows one of the challenges and the complexities of moving a gas main, which is already is happened recently on the Finch Avenue as part of the Finch West LRT project. And you can see, it needs to have significant amount of construction, staging, and coordination, and takes a significant amount of time to move the gas main to the right location. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the other option that we looked at, what we call it hybrid stacked option, and that's really again means that in the extreme case is where we locate the station entrance and exit building right on top of the station box. And the variation of that means that we start from the northwest option and shift it toward the station box as much as possible. That's what we call it hybrid stacked option. What it means is that in order to achieve that, we need to move this, the traffic permanently south, anything between 3.5 meters to 10 meters, depending on which variation of this option we choose, which is equal to 1 lane or to 3 lanes move, or even 4, depending again which option we choose. But what it does do, this option is really trying to minimize the impact as much as possible to the woodlot, and we are trying to balance really the impact to the woodlot against the impact to the traffic. In the ultimate situation where the station entrance is fully on top of the box, the impact to the woodlot is about 7%, and the impact to the significant trees is only 2. So basically, only 2 significant trees are impacted. There are significant opportunities, obviously, to enhance the public realm around the station area on the northwest and northeast side of the intersection. And however, when the road is permanently moved towards south, then the south boulevard is significantly reduced, whereas it's balanced then by achieving big boulevard on the north side, northeast side. So in terms of traffic impact, obviously the permanent realignment needs to happen, and permanent realignment obviously create a kind of road curve which improves the intersection safety, and then that means that also it becomes very much consistent. The station design becomes very much consistent with what we have in Royal York and Martin Grove, where we have the station entrances and the emergency exit building right on top of the box. This will also provide the fastest passenger experience, like transfer time from the bus all the way to the platform. And also in terms of accessibility and inclusivity, it provides provides the fastest connectivity from the ground level to platform, where you get an elevator straight down to the platform. The other options, they both needed us to get passengers from ground floor, ground level to the concourse first with set of elevators and escalators, and then from there transfer to another set of escalators and elevators. So it's a kind of two-stage transfer, whereas this one is a one-stage transfer. This, and then as a result of Gasman, obviously it's still going to be under the road because we are moving the road south. However, if the Gasman needs repairs in future, it creates an issue with closure of the lanes, which needs to happen for excavation to repair the gas main. So in terms of deliverability, this option takes approximately 4.5 years, and the reason for that is then we need to build the station box first and then build station entrance after that, and there is no parallel activity which can happen comparing to what you saw on northwest entrance option. So as I said, there are also variations both for this hybrid stack option as well as north-west option, where there are slight variations between few options there. But right now we are still seeing merits in this option, and we are looking forward to move this design also further with your input. Next slide, please. So I'm going to now ask Maridelia to take us through the next steps of tunnel construction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Omid, and good evening, everyone. Now I will be taking the opportunity to walk us through the next steps for tunneling activities and what to expect during the headwall construction at Kipling and Eglinton. As we have shared at previous meetings and engagements, an important milestone will be a shift-work project on the spring of 2022, when the tunnel boring machines, or TBMs, is scheduled to be launched from Renford and Eglinton. From there, the TBM will travel east at a pace of approximately 10 meters per day, breaking through the headwalls at Kipling on late spring of 2023. Now, prior to the arrival of the TBM at Kipling Station, the headwalls must be in place. And in order to achieve this, the construction of these headwalls will be starting in the spring of 2022 and will continue for approximately 11 months, wrapping up in time for the arrival of the TBM. To minimize disruption to traffic and residents, the headwall construction will be completed in stages. There are several aspects that were considered for this construction staging, including the relocation of a few existing utilities and the proximity of these headwalls to the intersection with Kipling. Now, what should residents expect during construction? Lane restrictions will be in place, but these restrictions will be both temporary and dynamic in nature, meaning that these will be adjusted as the different stages of construction's progress. At least one lane of traffic in each direction will be available at all times along both Kipling and Eglinton. Turning lanes will remain open, and there will be access to safe and accessible pedestrian routes during construction. Now, bus stops will be relocated as required, but sufficient notice will be provided to the community, and as much as possible, this will be remaining accessible for the public and residents. We should also expect to see a clear delimitation of work areas in the form of temporary fencing, traffic barriers, cones, and etc. And this is to protect the public from inadvertently accessing an active work area. Western Connector, the constructor, will be issuing a detailed traffic and construction management plan early next year. And this plan will be carefully reviewed by the project team and our subject matter experts prior to its approval and implementation. And at that point in time, we'll be able to come back to the community with a little bit more details and information on the specific aspects of these plans. Now, there are many things to consider during this construction period, but these are the key items that I wanted to highlight tonight and share with you as takeaways in preparation for the construction activities. So with that summary, I want to hand it over back to Josh for an updated project timeline.
Thanks, Maridelia. I learned a lot. That was very clear. So Many of you, I think, have seen our project timeline in the past in terms of the work moving forward to be able to open the Eglinton Crosstown West extension in the 2030-2031 timeframe. And there's a couple updates here that I wanted to highlight for you. So the work now is actually broken out. Previously, we had talked about the Renforth to Scarlet Tunnel, which is the contract that Miradelia was just speaking about, and then what we called the station rail and systems contract. We have now looked at how we can actually separate out and advance on two other pieces of the civil works. That includes the second tunnel, so the short tunneled section from just east of Jane into Mount Dennis. They're called the Mount Dennis Tunnel, as well as the elevated guideway, the 1.5 kilometer section from Scarlet to just east of Jane. And we recently achieved a milestone on the project where we released the request for qualifications for the Mount Dennis Tunnel last week. So what that means is that we're starting to look for teams who are interested in building that tunnel. And then later in the spring, we will be releasing the actual request for proposals to those qualified bidders. So still time to definitely define the project and what gets procured, but we are moving forward with that tunneled section, and we also look forward to announcements regarding the elevated guideway soon. So that's really just a highlight to everyone, just our updated contracting strategy, and the station rail and systems contract where we build out the stations and the tracks and all the other systems for the project is still on track to start in 2024. So that's just a quick update, and the work that we're talking about today, especially around Kipling station location, fits into that station rail and systems contract. So just to highlight that that work is still in the design phase and the actual procurement hasn't started yet. So just on the last slide, so we're done talking at you and we can start to answer questions. Just want to highlight we're really looking forward to your feedback, specifically when it comes to this topic of the Kipling-Eglinton station location. We mentioned that we have the survey, and we look forward to, there's just 3 questions to getting your feedback. That's open until January 7th. And there's lots of ways that you can contact us, either via email, phone, Twitter, many different ways. So, and if any specific individuals or groups would like to have smaller table discussions focused on the Kipling-Eglinton station options, please reach out to us through eglintonwest@metrolinx.com, and our community relations team can be in touch with you to set up those meetings. So we aim to finish this presentation by 7:10. It's 7:13 by my count, so we're close. I'll pass it back to you, Joseph.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to all of our presenters tonight. That was clear, and that was a huge amount of new information. So for people who are watching it, of course, right below the video is a place where you can download that presentation. And immediately below that is a yellow button that says take the Kipling-Eglinton poll. So this is a new additional means of providing your input. There's a 3-question questionnaire, and you can fill it out now. You can fill it out later. You can fill it out anytime until January 7th. And if you want to check something that was said tonight before you fill it out, you can come back tomorrow and the recording of tonight's presentation will be available to you. So that's there. I'll remind you again before we break off. Also, just before I ask the first of the written questions, the Zoom room now is open. Gurjeet is there waiting for you. And all you have to do if you want to ask your question live is you can just click on Join Zoom. And in a few minutes, we'll go over there and Gurjeet will be opening the microphones to allow you to do that. But first off, we did have some written questions. You answered quite a bit during the presentation itself. One of the questions is about the station construction. And on the timeline, the station construction seems to be, the station design and station construction seem to be those things that come last and seem to extend that 2025 to 2031 period. The question is, can't the station construction begin sooner? Wouldn't that speed up the process of the line so that we don't run into an elongated time period or delays, and it can be delivered more quickly?
Great. Thank you, Joseph. I'm going to pass this one to Mario, our senior project manager, to just talk to that, and why can't we start building the stations now, Mario? Oh, he's on mute. We aim to get through this entire meeting without telling somebody to come off mute.
You didn't give me an opportunity. Good evening, everybody. I apologize for that. The main reason why we can't build the stations beforehand is the tunnel boring machine needs to drive through the areas where the tunnels are, where the stations are, and it has to do with balancing the pressures on either side of the tunnel boring machine. If we do excavate down and have a void there, the pressures are unbalanced and we'll have issues with the tunnel drives. Also, then we got to walk the tunnel boring machine to the other end and relaunch it, which is always a risky scenario when you're launching the tunnel boring machine. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. And that was the same, the tunnel first, and then the stations was also the same approach on the Eglinton Crosstown, and then also on the other subway projects like the Scarborough subway extension. The other thing, just to kind of add on to that question, because I think it has to do with phasing of construction. I think Omid spoke to the fact that depending on the option that we choose for the station entrance, for example, the northwest option, we can construct the station building at the same time as we excavate and build the underground station box, because the station building isn't on top of the box. However, for example, on the stacked option, the station building is right on top of the box. So you have to do the excavation first and then do the station building. And then for the southwest option, you have to move the gas main. And so there's more complicated phasing. So there are ways that we look at how much work we can do in parallel, and we take that opportunity whenever we can.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Because you mentioned the Northwest and location, and you talked earlier about impact on the woodlot, and you had mentioned that at different points, for example, 7% of the woodlot would be affected. For people who are thinking about the number of trees, does that ever translate into numbers of trees, or is that 7% of covered area? Can you give us, for those of us who aren't technical, a bit of a better sense of how you actually go from 7% of the lot to the number of trees that would be affected?
I'll pass it to Sarah in a moment. I think, we've also had questions about does the woodlot serves as kind of a natural sound dampening from Eglinton, and having stood there many times at the corner, there is quite a bit of traffic and noisy traffic, and totally understand that. Mm-hmm. I think with our strategies around the station entrance location, it's as close to Eglinton as possible. So for any of the developments farther to the north, you still have the bulk of the woodlot to provide that sound dampening. But Sarah, specifically to the question about the percent and the trees, can you respond to that?
Sure, yes, no problem. So Obviously, as we've been discussing today, the designs that we're proposing, they're still under development. They're still being reviewed in quite a bit of depth. So as a result, the exact numbers of, or approximate numbers that we're looking at of individual trees or ecological areas that will be removed, those are still being completed as the design progresses. So this is why we are only able to really share the estimated percentages for the time being until further detailed designs are finished. But nonetheless, when it comes to the removal of trees, as I touched upon earlier, the tree compensation requirements that we have in place will be in accordance with the Metrolinx vegetation guidelines. So what this means is that obviously we have the city bylaw compensation requirements, which will be applied for every single tree that's removed. However, what the Metrolinx guideline does is it adds additional compensation requirements, which looks into the ecological value of the trees. So what that means is that where we have ecological compensation approaches, this means that we look at the present day ecosystem value of each tree. So when we go to compensate those trees based on the tree's value for the ecosystem services, this could be things like carbon sequestration, as well as pollution removal, those kinds of services that these individual trees and ecosystems actually provide for the community. We'll be taking that into consideration when we go to replant. So that's one of the main things. And as I also mentioned earlier as well, since we have already started the replanting process, it does mean that we can try and maintain that regional tree canopy for the area as well.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And did I understand you correctly in your response that at some stage during the consultations or during this process, more information will be provided about the actual impact on the trees once you get past the coverage area?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. We'll be definitely doing very detailed investigations and surveys and inventories to make sure that we have a clear idea of exactly how many trees or how much area we're impacting, and that will determine as well what kind of compensation levels we provide as well.
Right, and when you talk about that, and I'm asking really naive questions, but at the compensation levels and the guidelines, is that expressed as plant 2 new trees for each one taken out, or is it more complex than that?
So it's actually that's a great question. It's actually a combination of various different types. So there is an element of individual tree, and for each individual tree removed, how many trees are then replanted. But there's also a ecological compensation, which looks into the area of a tree or of clusters of trees or smaller trees, perhaps, such as shrubs and young plants. And it takes that into consideration as well. So sometimes it's a mix of the two.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Was useful info. You had talked earlier about you in the presentation about with the hybrid that the alignment of the road would be moved permanently to the south. Could you talk about the multi-use path under the hybrid scenario, please? What is the impact on that?
I can answer that question. So the multi-use path will be there for all the options. In the hybrid case, where we have to push the alignment of Eglinton Avenue to the south, then in close coordination with City of Toronto transportation staff, we would look to move the alignment of the multi-use path towards the south. So there would be, compared to today, there would be less boulevard space in between the road and the MUP and the townhomes to the south, but we would still maintain that MUP in that option.
Okay, and having looked at the timeline, which was very high level, when would you probably be telling the public about the more precise plans for the multi-use path and its realignment?
Good question, and I'll start, and Mario, if you have anything to add, please do. But I think we'd be looking to define the preferred station location in towards the first half of 2022. So that's the kind of time frame that we would have. Once we have selected the station entrance option, we'll be coming with more details. The precise location, start to talk about architectural features and other things like the MUP. Mario, is there anything you would want to add to that?
That was a pretty comprehensive answer, Josh. It's sometime, maybe to add a date, sometime in Q1 2023 to nail it down somewhat.
Okay, thank you. So that's
sorry. I realize I said something slightly different from you, Mario. You said Q1 2023, and I was saying first half of 2022. I'll defer to you. What is the actual time?
For the station construction, it's part of the SRS package, so that's later on. So it's Q1 2023.
To have all the things defined.
Correct.
Okay. So I apologize. I was a bit aggressive in my timelines.
And Metrolinx's process does, Joshua, this is a rhetorical question, entail another round of public information and the opportunity for the public to see and comment on the more detailed plans as you put them in place?
Definitely.
Okay. We are going to go over in a minute to the Zoom room where Gurjeet is there with people who would like to ask questions. We'll do one more question here on the Witten questions before we head over to Gurjeet. So again, if you want to ask a question out loud orally, you can click on Join Zoom, that yellow button right below this video, and you can go over there. So the question that I just wanted to fit in here is accessibility. Accessibility is very important to people in station design, and elevators are an important part of the design. Can you talk a bit about the elevator access as you're anticipating it for this station, and perhaps others if you have standards that will be applied across the board?
Omid, can I pass this question over to you in terms of elevators and redundant access and accessible access at this station and our other stations?
Yeah, thanks for this question. So we are designing these stations based on universal design standards that Metrolinx has recently published. It's called Design Standards number 2, as well as the other standards, OBC, Ontario Building Code, as well as CSA, which is Canadian standards. In that, we are providing redundancy of elevators, i.e. at least we have 2 elevators from each level to another level. So passenger, that means that if one elevator is down, passengers that they need to use elevator, they can use the other elevator, and that creates a kind of more reliability of the system. This is an improvement from other transit projects that has been built recently in Toronto. So that's the first answer basically to this question. The second answer is that in the northwest option and southwest option, because the entrance is sitting outside the station box, we have to get the passengers first from the entrance level or at grade level to a concourse level, as we call it, where passengers can then transfer to another set of elevators to go to the platform. So both of these options, northwest and southwest, they have what I call it a 2-stage transfer from grade level, or from, let's say, when the passenger comes from the bus stop, they go through the station entrance, they take elevators down to concourse, and then they walk from concourse again to the area. Then they get another set of elevators, go down to the platform. In both of these situations, again, we have 2 elevators. So we have 2 elevators coming from grade to concourse, and then 2 from concourse to platform. And that creates a full redundancy of the system from the ground all the way to the platform. In the case of stacked option, where the station entrance is fully on top of the box, similar to what we have in Royal York and Martin Grove, the station entrance is designed as such that passengers come to the station entrance, go through the fare gate, and they have 2 elevators which they take them straight down to the platform. It's basically one stage transfer from the ground all the way to platform, and that's very much straightforward transfer from the ground to the platform. We have this condition right now on Royal York, and also we have it on Martin Grove for the other 2 stations.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Joshua, was I cutting you off?
Well, I'm cutting you off now. I just wanted to add one thing to accessibility on top of elevators. We have in our previous engagements received questions about the platform configuration. In particular, we're planning these underground stations with island platforms, which means you have one center platform and the trains go on either side of the island platform. And there have been questions about, aren't side platforms, so for those who've experienced those, where the trains are in the middle and you have one side platform and each side, aren't side platforms better for those people who are visually impaired because they can go along the wall for guidance? This was also a concern raised with the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, where there are island platforms. And so in developing the accessibility requirements, Metrolinx actually convened a group with folks from CNIB as well as other persons with visual impairments to develop some design requirements for tactile guidance tiles, which actually are designed in such a way and have been tested so that folks who have visual impairments can confidently navigate a center platform. And these are part of our standards now for all our LRT and subway projects. So just I wanted to add that in because elevators are obviously a very important part of accessibility. Actually, my own daughter uses a wheelchair, so it's very important to me that she has access to these stations. But obviously, accessibility considers many different factors. So this is another one.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the additional information about the tactile tiles. That is good to know. Let's go over to the Zoom room. I believe that there are several people there. Gurjeet, are you ready to open the microphones for questions?
I am. Thank you, Joseph. We have a few participants here in the Zoom room, so thank you to everyone for participating today. We only have one question so far, and it's typed out in the chat from Ali. I can read it out. The question is, what is the status of the line extending to Pearson? Is the current extension being done in a manner to easily allow the extension? Will it be done at the same time as this extension? That's a great question. Thanks, Ali, and also a big area for interest for a lot of residents living in the corridor. I know that the province is committed to establishing connectivity with the Pearson International Airport, and a lot of work is underway at this time, including an initial business case for this extension. I'm going to pass it over to Josh to add more details to that.
Thanks, Gurjeet. Yeah, love this question. We're very excited to be able to extend the line all the way to Pearson Airport. We're meeting regularly with GTAA, City of Mississauga, Peel Region about the planning of the airport connection. At this point in time, there isn't funding committed to the airport segment. So all the work that we're doing now is really, I use the analogy of setting the table for the airport segment. So we're planning Renforth station as a temporary terminus. That's the last station that is in Mississauga and connects with the Mississauga Transitway. We're planning that station in such a way that the line can be easily extended from there. While keeping the rest of the line in service. So basically, we're doing everything we can to make sure that the line can be easily extended. We look forward to ultimately delivering it to provide a Pearson connection. At this point in time, we do not have any funding to be able to continue to advance on that project. So we're working hard on the planning, making sure we have everything set and we're ready to go, and planning that ultimately will be the the full length of the line. But for now, our funding gets us the 9.2 kilometers from Mount Dennis to Renforth.
Thank you, Josh. So stay tuned for that. We have another question here from Nikhil. I see your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question now.
So there's about three. So there's three choices of station, like north, south, and hybrid. And I believe the south side is pretty much canceled. So there's literally just two choices: the hybrid or the north. Between those two, the decision, is it going to be based on vote or and when I say vote, is it like public vote or vote from the committee?
So I'll start. If your question is about decision making, I can definitely respond to that, Nikhil, and thanks for your question. I mean, really, and hopefully this came through in the presentation. There are different pros and cons to each of the options. We just, for full information, as we've been working closely with City of Toronto Transportation and City of Toronto Parks and Forestry, we've received a lot of constructive challenges on different options. City staff have a preference for an option that would basically be somewhere in between the northwest option and the hybrid option. So you'd be partly in the Woodlot, and you'd have a smaller road realignment to the south of about 3.5 meters, so about 1 lane, where the road wouldn't be over top of the gas main. And so you're kind of trying to balance both transportation and the woodlot impacts. That we're in a position where we are really looking for feedback and to help guide this decision. So depending on the feedback we hear now from the community and through to the beginning of January, as well as any other meetings we have, as well as discussions with elected officials, we'll look to move forward, and Metrolinx will be making that recommendation, and we'll communicate that, and we'll also take it through our collaborative governance that we have with the City of Toronto. So that's kind of our decision making. It's not a vote. We're not proposing that we're going to get a statistically valid sample in this case, but it's a very valid question. So we're just going to take all the considerations, and I think hopefully I'm making it clear that while we've presented 3 options, actually there's a whole spectrum of options in between the northwest and that fully stacked option. So to try and kind of balance the woodlot versus the transportation, the road impacts versus the customer impacts. Yeah, and happy to answer any specific questions on the options if that people have. We have the experts on this panel if people want to inform, what input they provide in the survey.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you, Josh. We do have another hand up here. Kevin Richardson, I am going to unmute you now. You're free to ask your question.
Okay. So this might be something for later in the process, but I was just noticing that most of the current Crosstown stations are almost all exposed concrete at the platform level with white tiles, and the signs for the station names on gray, so they pretty much all look the same. So I was wondering if at the very least at the track level, can we have interiors that are different so it makes it easier for riders to recognize where they are at a glance, kind of like how most of all of the other subway stations are, so less homogeneous?
Thank you.
Really
Thank
interesting
you, Kevin,
point.
for your question. Go for it, Josh.
I was actually going to pass this one to our resident architect, Omid. Do you have, I know we may not have made that decision yet, but do you have thoughts on that, really interesting point?
Yes, sure. I think that's a very interesting question. We are working actually closely with the Metrolinx design team, which has set out design standards through the subway program. And we also recognize the monotonous nature of the existing line and the attention that we need to pay to the context in which we are located. We are going through some of options right now with Metrolinx. The design has not been finalized at all. The architectural finishes, the look and feel of them are not finalized, but comments and feedbacks like this also helps us to move the design further. There are various options, right now, some of which are taking the context slightly more, into account, such that we like to create stations that provide what I call it sense of belonging, and that gives a better wayfinding and sense of placemaking to the station, and brings the station and elevate the station to a position where the neighborhood sees the station as part of the community. We are taking this type of approach and design seriously. We are talking with Metrolinx design team, and hopefully at some point you will see more of the design when the design is developed in 2022.
It's almost two different approaches, because from the outside, for someone that is walking on the street, you probably do want something that is the same so that they recognize it as a station. And I think that the current Crosstown does that. The architecture is recognizable. The problem is that they've done that for the entire thing. So when you're in as a rider, if I fall asleep at Mountain Station and I wake up 10 minutes later and I look at the station that I'm at, I cannot recognize the way that I know that St. George is green and Spadina is yellow, so I know not to panic. So it might need to be monotonous at street level, but it needs to be way more distinct for the riders.
I think that's really very good point, and you're absolutely spot on. I think from passenger experience, the journey that in the point of entry and exit to a train, obviously at platform, and then that's really where you distinguish where you are. And I think from what I call it slightly more line-wide identity is where you stay at this at the entrances. So I think the design challenge is where do you strike the balance between being distinctive at platform and being consistent at grade level, and what gradient of consistency versus variability you're going to apply. And these are really the type of conversation right now that we have with Metrolinx design team to recognize that and address this issue as we develop the design toward RFP. But thanks for raising this really really good question.
Maybe Omid, you could talk about the difference between the interchange stations and the inline stations for ECLRT, the different color fabric?
Sure. I think in the current ECLRT, right now, the inline stations, they're all gray, and they have great panels also. Later, it's supposed to be introduced. And then when it comes to the interchange, they are orange, which is basically the color of the line. So the Eglinton line, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be line 5, is going to be orange line. So, and that also somehow is reflected in the entrances, canopies, and other places in the station. So in ECLRT, they tried to address it, at least from categorizing of the stations, whether they're inline or interchange. But we are also trying to talk with Metrolinx design team and make it slightly more location-based and more contextual, and address that issue more heads-on. Yeah, so I think that's a really great question, and we definitely take it on board.
Thank you, Omid, and thank you, Kevin, for the question. I just want to add that stay tuned, that we are going to come back next year with station engagements where we will discuss more about the look and the feel of the stations. So we will come back with more details and to get the community's feedback and input in some of those elements as well. I see another question here from a phone number ending with 443. You can go ahead and ask your question now.
Hi there. My issue is more with disability. It's Lewis. You guys were mentioning about one of the options having two different elevators, like two different sets of elevators. Has anyone thought of putting in like an escalator, but a mat escalator, for example, on one of the levels to kind of get people closer to the exit of the first elevator type of thing, so the accessible is better? And also another thing, I've heard about the northwest option. Sounds good, but in the beginning, didn't I hear that there were townhouses there? What about the issue with the townhouses? Is that going to affect the residents there and so on? That's it. Thank you.
So I can start, and Omid, maybe I'll pass it to you on the first part, but I'll start on the second part. Thank you for your question. So the townhomes are on the northeast side, directly at Kipling-Eglinton, and then there are also townhomes further west, away from Kipling. The Woodlot is in the northwest corner. So none of the options that we're talking about require relocation or impacts to any residences. So just wanted to be clear about that. And then specifically with respect to your first question about the escalators, Omid, did you understand the question?
Yes, I think if I understood it correctly, you're asking about what I call it the kind of full accessibility suite. Yes, so we have two escalators from each level again to the next level. So in addition to two elevators that we have, we also have two escalators next to those two elevators, and one of them goes up, one of them goes down. Also, Ontario Building Code requires us to have a public stair. So the suite that we have basically is two elevators, two escalators, and one set of stairs. That's basically a kind of, what we call it vertical circulation. Components that we have from each level to the next level. So in the case of northwest entrance, we have a set of two elevators, two escalators, and stairs going from grade level to concourse level. And then again, we have two sets of elevators and two escalators and one public stair going from concourse level to platform level. In the case of stacked, where you have the station entrance right on top of the station box, basically you have two elevators going straight from grade to platform. You still have, because the distance between grade to platform is longer than 12 meters, we have to break the escalators. So we have two escalators going to a concourse, and again, from there onwards, those escalators go to platform. So, but in effect, it works as if two escalators going from grade all the way to platform. In all of that scenarios, we also have public stairs. Again, that's required by OPC, and we are providing that. So the idea behind having a full entrance on top of the box, and that's what we followed on Royal York and Martin Grove, is trying to have a very, very straight passenger experience from ground all the way to the platform. And if we had to basically to utilize or deploy that idea on Kipling, which is what we call it fully stacked option, that idea again provides us with one set of elevators all the way from grade to the platform in one go, which is great from accessibility and also wayfinding perspective, because there is no other way for passengers, and they are not going to make mistakes. They know that they have to go on a straight line from the grade all the way to the platform. And that, I hope that I could explain what you were looking for.
I don't know. Am I on the air still?
Yep.
Well, yeah. What I was saying is basically instead of having escalators with stairs as normal, have escalators with mats, maybe that would be safer, like for older people and people with certain disabilities, like visually impaired, because they wouldn't have to worry about the platforms, like the landings and all that stuff, and it'd be all straightforward. That's more what I was talking about.
Sorry, escalators with mats, you said?
Correct.
I think this is like the escalators that you have like at a grocery store where you don't have stairs, that you just sort of like push up your cart or your stroller. Or
Oh, so
Correct.
you mean conveyor? It's
A
like
movable
conveyors.
walkway, like a
Uh,
Conveyor
movable
belts,
walkway.
yes.
Okay, so I think that's an interesting idea. I think so. I need to mention the characteristic of an escalator. So a typical escalator is about 30 degrees. You know, all the standard escalators that you see in public transport, they are 30 degrees angled. If we had to choose a movable walkway, the angle is much more shallower. That means that we need a much longer station box in order to provide that opportunity of a kind of movable walkway for you know, for people who need that movable walkway. And that station box that we have right now doesn't allow us to utilize such a thing. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you know, these movable walkways are actually generally quite slow, and it doesn't provide the opportunity to get in and out of the stations fast enough. So what we have tried to do is that we have tried to deploy 2 elevators such that people who definitely need you know, more help or you know, more support in terms of vertical circulation can use those elevators, and then the escalators are the standard escalators that we use in public transit, that they are 30 degrees in angle.
Thank you, Ahmed. Are there any follow-up questions for that? Okay.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another written question here that I can read out from Tristan. Will there be continuous overhead canopy from the station entrance to the 2 TTC bus stops on the northwest so the weather impacts are minimized? I'll pass that over to you, Josh, or to Mario.
Sure, I can start. Excellent question in terms of the transfer. You know, and we know that the biggest movement of passengers into the station, as the case for all our underground stations, is connecting from bus. So we are working with TTC to ensure that we have a good transfer. So certainly, I mean, if you take one of the examples being the northwest option, you know, just to use it as an example, the southbound bus would stop right beside the station, so people could easily get to and from the station to the bus. There wouldn't be a continuous canopy all the way over Kipling for somebody to get from the station to the buses on the other side, but we would also work with TTC to ensure that there was a really as convenient as possible connection across the road to the buses, and that there are comfortable waiting areas for people waiting for the buses on both sides. Omid or Mario, was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
I had nothing to say. For the underground stations, there will be far side stops. The northbound stop will be on the far side or on the north side of Eglinton, and that minimizes the journey time from the station entrance to the northbound bus stop. And the southbound stop will be right in front of the station.
And if I can add one more thing, the unpaid area for the station entrance is reasonably sized so that for passengers that they want to wait in a kind of more sheltered area for whatever reason, they can utilize that space. And that's also right now happening in other subway stations in Toronto, as you can see. We also, as Josh mentioned, we're working with TTC to make sure that the bus stop and station entrance are located as such that the transfer time from the bus stop to the station entrance is optimized. And right now, we are within seconds, from the time that you get off from the bus to go to the station entrance. I think the real question is that what if you have to get from the station to the bus? And I think that's really, where, as I mentioned earlier, we have reasonably sized entrances, especially on unpaid area, so that passengers can wait until the bus arrives, and that's really the type of conversation that we have with TTC. And I guess later also is all about the integrated transport network that is going to be deployed around these stations, so that the timing of the bus and station also becomes slightly more synchronized, and passengers can take advantage of that.
Thank you, Omid. Thank you, Josh. I think we have time for one more question, and I see a comment here from June, who's asked, how were people notified about this meeting? I've only received this in the mail today. I just want to mention here that that we use the Canada Post mailouts to inform residents of upcoming engagements. We also use other channels like our e-newsletter, our e-blasts, social media, and we try and do flyer drops and in-person outreach in specific areas as well. For this, we mailed out the Canada Post invitations to hit mailboxes on November 18th, and we know a lot of people received the notices on that day. We are hearing that some people did not receive the notice until yesterday and today morning, and we apologize for that, and do appreciate you making the time to participate today. But I just like to highlight that one of the benefits of these live engagements is that the video recording of the event lives on for the website forever, for people to view it even if they've missed the actual meeting. And the poll that we've set up as well is going to stay live until the week of January 7th, and we'll continue to collect comments until then. And as always, we're here if you'd like us to walk you through the material at a smaller table, or if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us directly, and we're happy to set something up for you. And I just noticed there's a follow-up question as well. Do any of the stations in Etobicoke have a place for dropping off passengers by car? I just wanted to squeeze this one in as well. Over to you, Josh.
That is a good question. Mario, are you able to speak to that?
So yes, Josh, thanks for the question. There is no specific pickup drop-off area that we have come to know, for instance, at Wilson, Islington, or Kipling Station. It would just have to be a drop-off curbside, but there is no dedicated passenger pickup drop-off area at our stations.
Thank you, Mario. I don't see any other questions here in the Zoom room. So I think we can adjourn here. I want to mention before we close this Zoom room that if there's any interest in that any of the groups have living in the area, or the residents, if there's any interest for a smaller table briefing, please feel free to reach out to us at eglintonwest@metrolinx.com, and we're happy to set something up for you. We're looking to collect feedback until the week of January 7th, so the poll is going to live there until then. And if you'd like to have us walk you through this one-on-one, we can do that as well. And all the contact details are listed here in the chat as well. Thank you for your participation today. Over to you, Joseph.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Gurjeet. And that does bring us pretty much to the end of this evening's session, but this is not the end of Metrolinx's engagement with you. As Gurjeet was just saying, there is, now that you've seen the presentation and heard the questions, there is the button right on this page where you can take the Kipling-Eglinton poll. Just click through there, and that will provide you with an opportunity to provide some feedback on what you've heard tonight. If you want to get in touch with Metrolinx, there's a green button at the top of the page, Contact Us. There's There's an email form right there that you can use if you want to contact Metrolinx. There's a Get Engaged button at the top as well. And one of the things that has attracted a lot of attention over the last few weeks has been the tunnel boring machine naming contest. And there's still time to participate in that. And again, there is also the opportunity to sign up to register to be informed of future meetings if you aren't seeing them here. So lots of ways to stay up to date. There will be other events. Thank you so much to the panelists tonight. You answered the questions, you provided information in a way that someone like me could understand, and thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who cared and came out to tonight's meeting and participated. This is our transit system, and thank you for caring and participating. Please provide your input after the meeting. Thank you, and good night.